Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and this new series that I call Journey to Med, where I'm trying my best and my very hardest to help prospective medical applicants achieve their dreams and their goals by getting into medical school. So if you've seen my previous videos that I've done on my channel, I've done a video about quantitative reasoning as well as abstract reasoning, where I explained to you guys how I prepared for these sections of the UCAT, as well as walk you through some questions from the official question bank of the UCAT. And I figured that it would, be a good idea to just continue this series and continue by doing other sections of the UCAT. So today I will be doing with you the situational judgment section, and I will be explaining to you guys how I prepared for the situational judgment section, as well as walk you through a few different questions from this section as well. So if this interests you and you like the content of my channel, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share this video with other people that could benefit from it as well. And with all of this out of the way, let's get into the video. Okay, so for the first part of this video, I wanted to explain to you guys how I prepared for the situational judgment part of this exam. And so the way I did it was with two different steps. The first step was that I read the Good Medical Practice Guide from the GMC, where they basically outline to you what a doctor should be doing, what a doctor can do, and what a doctor should not be doing, what a doctor cannot do, what is professional, what is unprofessional, and things like that. So it already gives you a really broad idea of, what situations are appropriate or not appropriate in the workplace. So that already was a really big head start for me. So I already knew exactly, how a doctor or medical student should react in certain situations. And then the next thing, to really tailor my knowledge and understanding of the situation, if the situation was just appropriate, or if it was very appropriate, or if it was inappropriate, or if it was extremely inappropriate. The way I would do this was with a lot of practice and practicing, as well as looking at the corrections and understanding why a certain scenario was considered very appropriate, or exactly understand why a certain scenario was considered only appropriate and not very appropriate. And it's only when you actually look at the corrections and understand the corrections and understand what is the reasoning behind the answer, that you can really start to get into the head of the people that make the UCAT and get your questions correct. And so for that aspect, I would suggest that you do practice with Medify, but that you also tailor and set a bunch of your time to do all of the questions from the official UCAT question bank. Because at the end of the day, the people that made this question bank are also the people that will make your UCAT test. So the way they think and the way the corrections will be formulated will be the same way in your actual exam. So you want to make sure that you understand the corrections and understand the way of thinking of the people from the official UCAT question bank rather than the people from Medify. Because sometimes if you put two very similar scenarios in Medify and in the official question bank, in the question bank the answer will be very appropriate, whereas in Medify it would only be appropriate. So that's why really look at the corrections. That will really help you to tailor your answer to make sure that you get a correct answer rather than just a partially correct answer, if you get what I mean. Okay, so now that I've explained to you guys exactly how I prepared for the situational judgment part of the UCAT, I'm now going to move on to explaining to you guys how I approached the situational judgment questions and what is kind of my technique to answering them. And I'm going to do this live. So the first question that we have here is the following. A junior doctor, Naomi, is working on a hospital ward which is particularly busy today due to a member of staff being ill. After lunch, she receives a call from the surgical team telling her that they are running behind schedule with today's surgical procedures. They explain that she needs to tell the last patient on their list, Harry, that his operation will be delayed until tomorrow and they will make him first on tomorrow's list. This makes no difference to Harry's safety. However, Naomi knows this operation is to remove a tumor and that Harry has been very anxious about the surgery. She explains to Harry that she has been asked to tell him that his surgery will not happen today. So how appropriate are each of the following responses by Naomi in this situation? So before I actually answer the question and explain to you guys how I approach it, I would just like to make a short little interruption to just reiterate the fact that in this section and in this section of the UCAT, there are two different types of questions, appropriate and inappropriate questions that goes together, or important, not important questions. And in this scenario, the first question that we have, it is an appropriate, inappropriate question. So we have to think about how appropriate the answers that Naomi will have to figure out the problem that she has. Are they appropriate or not appropriate? I hope that was clear. So the first response that Naomi would have is explain to Harry the reasons why his surgery will not happen today. So usually when I have these questions and these scenarios, the first thing I would do is look at the prompt. So here the prompt is explain to Harry the reasons why his surgery will not happen today. And then I would try to figure out, okay, does this prompt here cater to an appropriate response, or does it cater to an inappropriate response? That's the first thing. Is it in this section, A or B, or is it a C or D response? And once I figured out if it was appropriate or if it was inappropriate, then I would try to tailor my response and figure out, okay, is this inappropriate but not awful, or is this a very inappropriate thing to do? So this would give me kind of a two-step approach to answering the questions. First, kind of a broad overview, is this appropriate or inappropriate? And then tailoring it, is it just appropriate, or is this a very appropriate thing to do? Yeah, and so here we can clearly see that explaining to Harry, that's already anxious about his surgery, and giving him all of the details and explaining to him why his surgery will not happen today, it's definitely an appropriate thing to do. And if we now have to tailor it down and figure out if it's appropriate but not ideal or a very appropriate thing to do, then we can for sure say that it is a very appropriate thing to do, because by telling and explaining to Harry and communicating to Harry the reasons why his surgery will not happen today is actually answering his needs, calming his anxiety, and not causing any further harm to him. So that's definitely a very appropriate thing to do. And when we look at the answer here, they say that the correct answer is A, and they said it's entirely appropriate to explain to Harry why his surgery has been delayed. He was anxious about the surgery, and it is courteous to offer an explanation. So here, they basically explain to you precisely why answer A was the correct answer to choose. Okay, so now we can move on to the next question, which is asks Harry if he can come back to her tomorrow with any questions he may have, rather than asking them now because she is so busy. So when we look at this thing, we can definitely already see that this is a response that Naomi would have that would be an inappropriate response. And why is it inappropriate? It's inappropriate because in the text here, they tell you that the operation that Harry is having is to remove a tumor and that he is very anxious about the surgery. And the surgery is supposed to happen today, and he's already very, very anxious. And so telling Harry to come back tomorrow with no explanation whatsoever and saying, if you have any questions, ask them to me tomorrow, is causing Harry more harm, because he's going to be stressed throughout the night, not have any answers to his questions, and might even arrive even more anxious than he was the day before, the next day for his surgery, which is not what we want. So it's causing more harm to Harry. So it's definitely an inappropriate response, and in that case, it's also a very inappropriate thing to do because you're just causing harm to the patient, and yeah, it is just very inappropriate. And when you look at the answer, they say that the response is D. Given that Harry has been very anxious about the surgery, prolonging the wait without allowing him the opportunity to clarify anything is a very inappropriate thing to do. So that's basically what I explained. Moving on. Okay, so for this question, which is ask another medical student on the ward to explain to Harry the reasons why his surgery is postponed until tomorrow. If we have to figure out is this appropriate or inappropriate thing to do, I think the answer is pretty clear. This is an inappropriate thing to do because Naomi, as they said, is a junior doctor. So she's already Dr. Naomi. She already has 5 years of studies behind her, etc. And so at that point, Harry, he is confided into Naomi, and he has some trust in Naomi that she's going to take care of him correctly. And by asking a medical student that he doesn't really know, and a medical student that doesn't even have a degree yet, to explain to Harry that, his surgery is not happening today and explaining, it's postponed to tomorrow is not an appropriate thing to do. Naomi should be doing this on her own and doing, owning up to her responsibility and her professionalism to do it. So that would be a very inappropriate thing to do. And in the answer, they said that it's answer D. Harry will have placed a degree of trust in Naomi and should understand that he has been very anxious. To ask a medical student is very inappropriate. Next is promise to Harry that she will somehow ensure the surgery happens today as originally planned. So this, for example, is one of the questions that you have a direct answer. You don't have to go through the two-step process. You directly know what the answer is. And usually when you have that feeling, that kind of gut feeling that the answer is like you know it already, it's usually an answer that's very appropriate or an answer that's a very inappropriate thing to do. And so in this case, doing this is a very inappropriate thing to do. And why is this a very inappropriate thing to do? It's very inappropriate because Naomi knows that, they say that a surgical team member is missing, is ill, and so they're already behind schedule. So accommodating to doing Harry's surgery today is just not possible. So promising to Harry and telling him, okay, Harry, I promise you that today you will have your surgery, is actually lying to him, because the surgery will not happen and might just relieve Harry momentarily, but then will actually cause more harm when he does realize that his surgery is not happening today and might cause even more anxiety. So that would be answer D. And if we look at the correction, it says answer D as well. Making a promise to Harry that somehow his surgery will happen today is highly inappropriate. The surgical team has already told Naomi that this won't be the case, and Harry will lose trust in Naomi if it doesn't happen. It may also serve to worsen his anxiety, as he may become unsure about whether this procedure will happen even tomorrow. So that's the explanation. The next response is tell Harry that having the operation postponed until tomorrow will not affect his safety. So this, again, is one of those answers that from the get-go that it's a very appropriate thing to do. You don't have to really go on to figure out is it appropriate or inappropriate. You know that it's appropriate, and then you know for sure that it's a very appropriate thing to do. And why is it a very appropriate thing to do? Well, it's very appropriate to do this because Harry has been known to be very anxious about his surgery, even though the whole medical team know that doing the surgery tomorrow will not affect his health whatsoever. So telling Harry and trying to reassure Harry of telling him doing the surgery tomorrow will not affect your safety in any shape or form is a very appropriate thing to do, because it will help and soothe his nerves and calm his anxiety. And if we look at the answer is A. It is very important for Harry to understand that delaying the procedure until tomorrow will not affect his safety, especially given that he has been very anxious. This is an entirely appropriate course of action. Okay, the next question that I have here is a important or not important question. So it's a second type of question in the situational judgment category. So here it is. Marin, a medical student, is walking through a hospital corridor when she sees a small pool of liquid in the middle of the floor. She is already 5 minutes late for the start of her shift. However, does not want to leave without cleaning it up. Marin must decide how to deal with the situation. So how important to take into account are the following considerations for Marin when deciding how to respond to the situation. So the chance that someone may slip over the liquid and hurt themselves. So again, with important, not important questions, I approach them exactly the same way as appropriate, not appropriate questions. So I would understand first, is this course of action a very important thing to do? An important thing to do, or is this something that's not so important? So in this category, we know for sure that it is an important thing to do. And is this just important, or is this very important? And in this scenario, this would be very important, because making sure and taking into consideration the fact that this liquid that's on the floor could hurt and harm other patients or harm other members of the staff is a very important thing to take into consideration. You should be cleaning the liquid up because of the fact that it can hurt people. And if we look at the correction, the correct answer is A. It is important that Marin considers whether someone may slip and hurt themselves. This is likely given the position of the liquid. While staff may hurt themselves, the greater risk is for patients who may have impaired vision, mobility, or stability. So that's how they justify their answer choice. The next course of action is the possibility that the liquid could be hazardous. Again, that's something that's very important to take into consideration, because if you have hazardous liquid lying around in the air, this could harm the patients that, as they said, have reduced mobility, impaired visions, stability problems, but it could also hurt the staff and the personnel that's there that is supposed to cater to the patients. So if the staff is hurt, then how can they care for the patients? They can't. So answer A, and again, the correct answer is also A, because it is unacceptable to expose staff to known hazards in the workplace and to expose patients to further risks on top of their current ailments and infections. Next, that Marin is running 5 minutes late for her shift. So I think that the fact that she's running late is definitely something that should be considered. But after right now I'm hesitating if it's in the important category or in the not important category. And I think that if we weigh both sides, having a liquid that could be hurting someone in the middle of the corridor is more important than running 5 minutes late. So I think that I would put it in the not important category, and I would put it of minor importance, because of course being late is still something, there's still some importance to that, because her being late means that she can't cater to her other patients that are waiting for her. So I would put of minor importance. I'm not 100% sure if that's right, so let's check. Yeah, so the answer is also C. This is of minor importance. Marin could take into account the fact that she is running late. However, the safety of staff and patients should be her main concern. Okay, the next is that it is not Marin's job to clean the hospital. This is one of those things where you know from the beginning what the answer is, and this is not important at all, because Marin still works in that hospital, and she's still responsible for safety of the patients, as she is a medical student. And so even if her job is not the janitor, even if her job is not cleaning the hospital, she is still there to make sure that the people in the hospital, the staff, as well as the patients, are also taken care of and are safe. And so that would be very, very arrogant of a response to say that it's very important. I'm not supposed to clean the hospital, so I'm not going to do anything about it. That's not how she should be responding. So this right now is not important at all. And so the answer is also D. This is not important at all, as the safety of staff and patients should be her main concern. Marin should coordinate an appropriate response to the spilled liquid, even if she herself does not end up cleaning it up. So yeah. Then we're moving back to appropriate, inappropriate question, which says, Stefan, a medical student, is on placement in the emergency department. A fellow medical student, Lola, who is on a different ward, telephones Stefan and asks if he can access the files of a patient currently in the emergency department. Lola explained that the patient is a friend of hers and she would like to know how he is. And then the question is, how appropriate are each of the following responses by Stefan in this situation? Assume that each of the following responses would be said politely. So, Stefan, first option, sorry Lola, you know that I'm not allowed to give out patients' information. So that first goes into the appropriate category, because Stefan is a medical student, Lola is also a medical student, and they are both going to be doctors, and they both know that patient confidentiality is the most important thing. And it's not because Lola is also a medical student in the same hospital that she can have access to all the patients in this hospital. She can only have access to the information of her own patients. So Stefan, if he would actually be given the information to Lola, he would be breaching the patient's confidentiality. And so by answering, sorry Lola, you know I'm not allowed to give out a patient's information, very politely, is a very, very appropriate thing to do, and that's what he should be doing. And the answer is A. Patient confidentiality is a paramount to doctor-patient relationship. Doctors in training should only ever access patient information if they are directly involved in the treatment and their care, etc., etc. Accessing patient information for any other reason breaches patient confidentiality. Duty of candor as a doctor is unethical, breaches data protection laws, and would be viewed very poorly by governing bodies. Explaining clearly and politely to Lola you will not be given out the information, and she should know this is not allowed, with no room for misinterpretation, is the appropriate response to this unreasonable request. So I read this pretty quickly, but if you wanted to read it with more detail, you could go on the website and find it as well. Question 12. And this is one of the times where you should be like really taking care to read the correction slowly, so you have a really precise answer. The next question is, Stefan would be saying, why don't you visit your friend when you are free to check how he is? I think that this would be in the appropriate category, so in A or B, because this would be kind of insinuating that he's not going to be giving out information, and that if she wants to check on her friend, she has on her own to have to go see her friend and ask the friend to tell them. Because at that point, that wouldn't be breaching the confidentiality at all, because her friend would actually be telling to her his own information. So I think that this would definitely be either a very appropriate thing to say or appropriate but not ideal. The only reason why I might put it on appropriate but not ideal is the fact that he's not being very, very clear with his response, and he's not being 100% like, I cannot give you this to you, this is breaching confidentiality. Kind of has an answer that surrounds the question and doesn't really give a blunt, precise answer. So I think I would put appropriate but not ideal, but I'm not 100% sure. See, so they said that the answer was supposed to be A, because to do is not access the information, as in doing so would be a breach of patient confidentiality and data protection rule. This STEM provides a practical solution to his colleague Lola, and is sensitive to the fact that Lola might be worried about her friend. Oh yeah, true. So see, at that point, if I would have made this mistake when I was actually practicing for the UCAT, I would take like a post-it note or whatever, my paper that I was having next to me, and write down worried about her friend, and write down the key information. So next time if I encounter a similar prompt, a similar question, then I would be like, oh, last time I remember that this was a very appropriate thing to say because he was also taking care of his friend, and he was making sure that patient confidentiality was not breached and didn't break data protection rules. And then this would allow me to progress and improve later on. So that would definitely be something that I would do. And this would allow me next time to have the question correct and not have it partially correct, like right now. And then the rest says, it would be preferable to also remind Lola that it's not appropriate to do this, as it puts him in a difficult situation, but this could be addressed at a later date. So you see, this what I talked to you about previously. The reason why I put it in B, they actually put this in answer A because this is kind of a secondary problem and can be addressed later. Okay, the next is, of course, let me access your friend's file and send it over to you. So this is one of those things again where 100% that it's like the answer. This is a very inappropriate thing to say because it breaches patient confidentiality, data protection, everything like that. Yeah, he just bluntly breaches confidentiality for Lola. That shouldn't be doing this request. That's inappropriate. So this is D, 100%. Again, very inappropriate. Accessing patient information for any other reason than being directly involved breaches patient confidentiality, duty of candor as doctor is unethical, breaches data protection, blah, 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 viewed very poorly by the government bodies. It could lead to disciplinary action from the medical school. So that I would also note all of the important things here. Like I would write breaches patient confidentiality, duty of candor, unethical, breaches data protection laws, viewed poorly. I would write all of this down on a paper so I would have kind of, a bank of ideas when I would actually be answering my questions later on when I continue practicing. The next thing would be, it would be probably best to speak with the doctor who is treating your friends to find out more information. Again, this I think would be a very inappropriate thing to say because he's kind of avoiding the problem. He's not giving the data, but he's avoiding the problem and involving a third party, whereas he should be the one cutting the discussion short rather than make the doctor busy with unnecessary fluff and unnecessary, requests that are just unprofessional. So I would put this as a D. And okay, they put it as a C because they say that it's inappropriate but not awful. Both these medical students should understand The doctor treating the patient will also not be able to give out patient information, and asking for it is inappropriate. It is passing the responsibility to the doctor to have the conversation with Lola, when it could have been addressed with Stefan at the time. So you see, everything that's read here is what I told you just before, but I still put a different answer. So reading the corrections, even though your reasoning is the same, is always really important because it gives you, the precise answer. And then they tell you it's not awful because he has not breached any confidentiality. And even though he's passing the buck to the doctor to explain to Lola, it's a clear-cut scenario. At no point should the patient information be accessed. It could be appropriate to Stefan. It would be more appropriate for Stefan to state this from the beginning. So for them, it's inappropriate but not awful just because he did not give out any patient information. And it's not, but even though he could have done a better job by actually telling to Lola directly, you shouldn't be doing this. Patient confidentiality is the most important thing. And, don't disturb the doctor with this request, basically. Okay, so I'm done. I think I'm going to stop here. Okay, so I'm going to stop here answering the questions because I feel that the video is already going to be long enough, and that I don't need to go through that many questions with you, showing you exactly, how I approach it with understanding, does this statement enter the appropriate or not appropriate, or important or not important, and then tailoring it, is it answer A or is it answer B, or is it answer C or answer D? So I think that should be enough to understand how to approach situational judgment questions. And at the end of the day, situational judgment is also a lot of practicing, exactly doing what I've done, making mistakes, making mistakes, and sometimes, writing D when it's supposed to be a B, and then reading the correction to really understand why it was a B and get into the head of the UCAT, the people that make the UCAT. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share it with other people that could benefit from it as well. And if you have any other questions regarding this video, or you want me to do other specific videos surrounding the UCATs, please leave a comment down below or contact me through DMs at differentlyMoi on Instagram. And so yeah, I think I'm done with this video. Thank you for watching.